Okay, as I said, so this is the smallest SelectLine C machine which we have, consisting out of the so-called basis or basic module number 1, which is what we see here. Can be equipped with one fluxer head, one preheat station, and then minimum one solder pot or a brush or an AOI, whatever is needed. Fluxer head is sitting underneath here. It's with a special cap. There we have the so-called SFM, SEHO flux monitoring, with a small light barrier. That's an extra option where we are counting the drops and measuring the shape of the drops in order to see really and to store in the MC server how much flux has been deposited to the board. There's a capacitive sensor, so depending what you are programming, let's say after every 10 boards, the fluxer head is going to the capacitive sensor, and there will be air blown over it in order to reduce the clock if there is something. But that's a maintenance part. So during the normal maintenance time, you just take a small piece of towel or something like this and just wipe over the fluxer head, and then you're good to go again. Next thing what we see is the preheat station that can be equipped with quartz tubes or pulsar tubes. All of them can be activated or deactivated one by one separately. This is depending on the programming later on the PCB. Wherever the PCB is located over the preheat station, we will just turn on, for example, the first lamp and the second lamp for a dedicated time in order to heat it up to the temperature which is needed for having a good soldering process. Can be equipped also with a pyrometer in order to check then the temperature on the PCB surface itself directly. The transport in that case can be electrically, automatically changed in the width. This is an option. It's depending if the customer has like one board or is running in carriers, then you don't have to have this option because you always have the same width. Then you can have it fixed. You can have it mechanically adjustable, or much more easier would be the automatic adjustment done via the software of the machine. Up here we have a convection from top side, convection heating inside. That's also an option. Once again, it's always depending on the products and on the components on the products. Nowadays, especially for the automotive and electrical vehicles or onboard charger system, something like this, the components are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Sometimes even the PCB, 4, 5, 6 layers. So there you need to have as much preheat or as much heat as possible in order to get this energy into the board and the components, that later on you get a good result in the soldering. Next station within this system is then typically minimum one solder pot. That's the solder pot number 5. This is coming out of the history, so nowadays we have solder pot number 3, 4 and 5. Number 5 is the smallest one, as I explained before. Can contain up to 10 kilogram of solder, and it got an electrodynamic pump, so there's no wear part or something inside, so this can last more or less forever if you're doing a good maintenance job. So underneath here there would be then later on equipped the solder nozzle, typically in a SelectLine C machine or in any of our selective machines. If we are talking about mini wave, we have a nozzle with a 360-degree flow from the solder, so therefore we don't need any kind of angle of the PCBs. We're just running with 0 degrees, and the solder pot has its own axis and is doing the solder job wherever it is needed. So here we have the solder pot movable and not the PCB. Yeah? So we have here the flying pot and not a flying board. Same here if it is needed, but this is inside our demo machine. It is equipped. Inside reality or inside real machines, it's not that often be used in such a small machine. But here you can also have a top convection in order to have the energy or the heating process still ongoing also via or when the board is being processed over the solder. This is depending again on the PCB. If it's a very big PCB where you have a lot of things to solder, so the cycle time is very high, then maybe you really need to equip it with another top convection heating, that the PCB or the components are not getting too cold during the solder process. Of course they are getting warm also from bottom side, from the pots themselves. If the machine is running, we have like 280 degrees or something like this in the solder pots, but still can be needed, of course. Good, as I said before, this can also be equipped inside here. Then instead of a solder pot, we can have a brush or an AOI.
Why would you have the brush?
The brush is if you have, for example, very small spaces in between some connector rows or something like this, where they tend to have solder balls, a bridge, for example. Also, the brush wouldn't help too much for the bridge, but it would help for the solder balls themselves. Then you will. But this is also depending on the program. If you have like the PCB where you have, let's say, 10 solder joints, and one is always tending to have some solder balls or splashes or something like this, then you just program that the brush head is only going to this one dedicated spot, so it has no big influence then on the cycle time also, and it's getting rid of the solder balls directly. It got a vacuum sucker, vacuum cleaner with it, so it's sucking out the solder balls directly, that they are not indefinite running or flying through your machine. And we can see this later on also where it is equipped because of space limitation normally. It's very nearby. In the power selective we have a little bit more space where we can also have a better look to the inside. What else we can have inside, or normally is very useful for production, is to have a small camera which is recording the soldering job. This would be displayed then later on here on the monitor of the operator. And there you can see then, okay, maybe I need to have it 1 millimeter shifted to the left side because I'm not catching all of the spots 100%. Then it's very easy, you just do it like here, send it to the machine, and within the next board it will come active to have this row, for example, 1 millimeter to the left. You can have this OTP software, it is called, where you make, it's one software for all processes. So we will define the fluxing, deposition, the time, the amount, things like this. Then we have the preheat time to be defined, how long it will be over the preheat station. Then we will define the solder jobs itself with some small rows or just some spots, depending on what you have to solder at the end of the day. Same for the brushing, same for the AOI. All of these processes is within one software, one station. So all of this is coming from SEHO. Even the AOI is developed by us, by SEHO themselves. So it's not a third-party AOI, it's really an AOI from us. You can have conveyor systems in front or in the back. This is really depending. So typically this is, as we can see, an inline machine. It will be integrated into whatever line at the customer side. Can be integrated with some local conveyor system. It can have a conveyor system of SEHO, of course, which we will see later on also more in detail. So here we can almost, the conveyor system is more or less always tailored to the needs of the customer. The machine itself, this is, like I said, this is the basic module, which you surely have to have at the very first beginning. This can be expanded by other modules at any time. So even if your customer starts with only these 2 solder pots, and later on he says, it's not enough, I have such a high output, I need, for example, 1 more solder pot. And you're just attaching one smaller module, not as big as this one, to that with another possibility of 2 other processes. Can be 1 solder pot or 2 solder pots again. Can be a combination, like I said before, a solder pot and a brush, solder pot or an AOI, or even a brush or an AOI.